She was forced to shift before the entire pack. Silver-flamed Luna Wolf rose, and the crown bowed to her. The night sky over the kingdom of Verith was heavy with clouds, as if it too feared what was about to unfold. Silver mist curled through the jagged cliffs of the highlands, and the distant howl of wolves echoed like a warning. In the heart of this shadowed land stood the royal palace, its spires sharp against the darkness, a place where power, fear, and secrets intertwined like the twisted ivy on its ancient walls. Rose, the daughter of a minor noble family, had never imagined she would stand in the great hall of the king, her fate entangled with the crown. She had always known she was different. The silver flame that danced in her blood, the rare and dangerous gift inherited from her ancestors, marked her apart from everyone else. Yet she had hidden it all her life, fearing what people might do if they knew. Now, summoned by the royal decree, she had no choice. Her hands trembled as she walked through the palace gates, the cobblestones slick beneath her boots from the night's mist. Servants and guards stared, whispering behind gloved hands. Even the shadows seemed to stretch toward her, eager to see if the stories were true. The great hall was vast, its ceilings lost in shadow, chandeliers glinting like frozen stars. At the center of it all sat the king, a man known for his pride and ruthless wisdom. His eyes, cold and measuring, scanned Rose with a scrutiny that made her pulse quicken. Around him, the pack of elite warriors and courtiers waited, their expressions a mixture of curiosity, fear, and awe. "You are late," the king said, his voice a calm yet sharp blade. "And yet you are here. That is more than some would dare to hope." Rose bowed, feeling the weight of hundreds of gazes pressing down upon her. Her mind raced. What did he want from her? Why summon her to this court of power and suspicion? A hush fell over the hall as she took a tentative step forward. The air itself seemed to hold its breath. Rose's chest ached with the burden of what she was about to do. She knew the moment she revealed her true form, the entire court would see her not just as a noblewoman, but as something more, something feared, something powerful, something they could never ignore. The king's hand gestured almost casually, yet with a gravity that made the gesture heavy with command. "Do it," he said. "Show us the truth of your heritage." Rose's heart pounded. She closed her eyes and let the silver flame within her stir. A warmth spread through her body, fierce and alive, coursing along her veins like fire wrapped in ice. Her bones shifted, muscles reshaped, and fur like moonlight unfurled along her limbs. Her senses sharpened, the scent of the stone walls, the distant howl of a wolf beyond the palace grounds, even the subtle fear hiding in the courtiers' whispers. When she opened her eyes, she was no longer fully human. She stood on all fours, her silver-flamed fur catching the flicker of candlelight, her eyes glowing like twin moons. The hall gasped. Some recoiled in fear, some knelt in awe, and others stared with a mixture of envy and suspicion. The king's expression remained calm, but there was a flicker of something beneath his composed mask. Respect, perhaps, or recognition of a power he had not expected to see firsthand. Slowly he bowed his head, not out of submission but acknowledgement. It was a gesture heavy with meaning, one that left Rose feeling both vindicated and uneasy. She was powerful, yes, but this demonstration also marked her as different, as untouchable and yet exposed. The whispers around her grew, a soft murmur that seemed to ripple through the stone walls. The silver-flamed Luna Wolf, one noble breathed. "It is true." Rose's tail flicked nervously, her mind swirling with thoughts of danger and destiny. She had always known her gift was rare, and with rarity came scrutiny. The court's eyes were not kind. They were hungry like predators circling their prey. She had to be careful. One wrong move and her power could turn against her. A figure emerged from the shadows of the hall. Tall, masked, and silent, the stranger's presence carried a weight that made even the guards tense. Rose's instincts prickled. She did not know this person, yet there was something familiar in the way the air seemed to bend around them. "Your destiny is greater than you imagine," the figure said, voice low and echoing, almost as if it came from somewhere between the world of humans and the spirits. "The crown bows to you, but not yet to your heart. Watch closely, silver-flamed. Every choice will bind or break you." Before Rose could respond, the figure melted back into the shadows, leaving only a trace of cold, silver light lingering in the hall. She felt the weight of the warning settle deep in her chest. Destiny, power, and danger had all arrived in a single night, and she had barely taken her first breath. The king's voice cut through the murmur. "Return to your chambers, Luna. You will remain under the crown's watch. Tomorrow your training begins. Do not disappoint me." Rose bowed again, rising to her human form. The shift back left her exhausted, every muscle trembling, but she stood tall. She knew the court would watch her every move, and she would have to navigate this new life with cunning and courage. The elite warriors, the nobles, even the masked stranger, all of them would test her, and some would wish her failure. As she left the great hall, the corridors of the palace felt different. Shadows seemed to lean closer, whispers lingered like unfinished prayers, and the scent of fear mixed with awe followed her every step. She paused by the window of her chambers, looking out at the silvered forest below, the moon casting a pale glow across the mist. She had always been strong alone, but the court demanded more than strength. It demanded strategy, restraint, and the ability to command respect without fear or hatred consuming her. Rose closed her eyes and let the wind carry her thoughts outward, letting the silver flames within her settle into a quiet pulse. She had survived this first trial, but the night had only just begun. A faint rustle behind her made her spin. Nothing. Just the curtains swaying in the wind. Yet her instincts told her that the palace itself was alive, watching, waiting. The prophecy whispered through her mind, a Luna wolf who would bind the crown and the pack, whose flames could heal or destroy. Tonight she had taken the first step, but the path ahead was darker than the hall she had just left. In the silence of her chamber, Rose allowed herself a single thought. The weight of power was nothing compared to the solitude it brought. She was alone in her destiny, yet the fire inside her promised that she would not remain powerless. Even the crown, even the court, would learn that the silver-flamed Luna wolf was not merely a legend whispered in fear. She was real, alive, and rising. And far beyond the palace walls, the masked figure watched from the shadows, their eyes reflecting the silver light of the moon. "The choice will come soon," they murmured. "Will she bow or will she break the world?" Rose did not know yet, but deep within, she felt the stirrings of something unstoppable. The journey of power, of longing, and of secrets had begun. And tomorrow, when the sun rose over Werewolf, the kingdom would never see her the same way again. The first chapter of her destiny had been written in silver flames, in awe and fear, in power revealed and judgment passed. And in the heart of the night, the howl of wolves carried through the highlands, a warning and a promise. The silver-flamed Luna wolf had awakened. The morning sun barely touched the spires of Werewolf Palace, hidden behind heavy clouds that seemed reluctant to let light in. The air smelled of wet stone and silver mist, remnants of the night's chill. Rose stood by the window of her chamber, her silver-flamed hair catching the faint glimmer of dawn. The memory of last night's display in the great hall still burned in her mind. She had shifted before the entire court, revealed her power, and yet, despite the awe, a gnawing unease clung to her like a shadow. She knew that showing her strength was only the beginning. Power alone did not earn respect, especially not in a court of whispers and ambition. Every step she took from that moment would be watched, measured, and judged. A soft knock echoed through her chamber. "Enter," she called, smoothing her dress and trying to appear calm. The door opened, revealing a young attendant, a boy no older than 15, carrying a tray of morning tea. "Mistress Rose," he said softly, "the prince requests your presence in the council chambers." The king wishes for you to witness the matters of the realm." Rose's heart tightened. The prince, the heir to the throne, had been present at last night's display, and she remembered the way his gaze had lingered on her, calculating and unreadable. There had been no warmth, but no fear either, only a quiet intensity that unsettled her. "I will go," she said, taking a deep breath. She forced herself to walk as if she belonged here, even though every fiber of her being screamed caution. The council chambers were a long, narrow hall, lined with portraits of ancestors whose eyes seemed to follow her every move. At the far end sat the king, his posture straight, hands folded, his face a mask of authority. Beside him, the prince watched silently, his dark eyes reflecting curiosity, challenge, and something unspoken. "Rose," the king began, "last night you reminded us all that power wears many forms, but the crown does not kneel to power alone. It bends only to wisdom, control, and loyalty." Rose nodded, keeping her expression calm. Her mind raced with questions. How much control could she truly have over the silver flames? And what did the crown truly want from her, allegiance or obedience? The prince rose from his seat, his movements measured, almost deliberate. "Mistress Rose," he said, his voice smooth yet firm, "if you are to remain under our protection, you must learn the rules of this court. Strength without understanding is dangerous, even for someone with your gifts." Rose's pulse quickened. His words were both a warning and a test. She could feel the subtle tension between them, a game neither had agreed to play, yet both were forced into. "I understand," she replied, her voice steady, though inside she burned with a mix of defiance and curiosity. "I will learn." The council discussed matters of the realm, taxes, border patrols, and the ever-looming threat of rogue clans. But Rose's attention drifted to the prince. Every so often he glanced her way, his eyes sharp, assessing her not only as a noblewoman but as a force of power he could neither ignore nor control. She felt a strange pull toward him, a mixture of caution and fascination, as if the flames inside her responded to his presence. After the council ended, the prince approached her in the quiet of the hall. "Do you know why the king fears you?" he asked, his tone soft but edged with challenge. Rose shook her head. "I do not know. I only know that I am different and the court sees what it fears." "Different can be dangerous," he said, his gaze piercing. "And yet it can also be necessary. The kingdom may need someone like you, but someone like you must also learn restraint. Your flames are wild, unpredictable. Power without control is a storm that destroys everything in its path." Rose felt the truth in his words, though she resented the implication. She was not weak. She had survived, adapted, and learned in ways the crown could never imagine. Yet in his presence she felt small, as though his words were chains she could not see but could not ignore. "I will learn," she said again, more firmly this time, "but I will not hide who I am." The prince studied her, a flicker of something passing in his eyes, respect perhaps or surprise. "We shall see," he murmured, and turned, leaving her with a sense of unfinished challenge. Days passed, and Rose's life in the palace became a delicate balance of obedience and self-assertion. She trained in the art of diplomacy, learning the subtle gestures, the careful words, the hidden meanings behind every glance. Yet at night, when she allowed herself to wander the silver forests near the palace, she let the wolf inside her run free. The moonlight kissed her fur, and the silver flames danced along her paws as she raced through the mist. In those moments she was untouchable, free from the rules of court, from the weight of prophecy, and from the judgment of the crown. But freedom was fragile. One night, as she rested on a cliff overlooking the valley, she sensed a presence. Shadows moved with intent, eyes gleaming in the dark. She shifted instantly, silver flames igniting along her back, and came face to face with a predator unlike any she had seen, neither human nor fully wolf, but something in between. "You are stronger than I expected," a voice hissed from the shadows, smooth and dangerous. But strength alone will not save you, silver-flamed Luna. Rose's fur bristled. She could feel the danger in the air, the pull of power that rivaled her own. "Who are you?" she demanded, trying to keep her voice steady. "Someone who knows the truth," the figure replied, stepping closer, yet remaining cloaked in shadow. "Your gift, your curse, it is tied to this kingdom more deeply than you imagine. And the crown, it does not merely watch you, it waits to bind you." Rose growled low in her throat, the flames along her fur flickering with tension. She had faced many challenges, but this was different. This presence was not courtly intrigue or cautious whispers. It was raw, supernatural, and relentless. "You will learn soon enough," the shadow whispered before melting into the mist, leaving Rose alone with her racing heart and the echo of its words. By the next morning, the king summoned her again, this time for lessons in courtly strategy. The prince joined her, watching her every move, correcting her subtly, guiding her in ways both helpful and challenging. Every moment with him was a lesson not just in diplomacy, but in control over her mind, her heart, and the silver flames she could no longer hide completely. Rose began to realize that the prince himself carried power, not of the wolf, but of influence, of authority, of subtle mastery that could sway kings and kingdoms. She felt both admiration and irritation, sensing that their fates were tangled in ways neither of them yet understood. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the clouds, painting the sky in shades of crimson and gold, the prince approached her in the training courtyard. "Do you know why the court fears you?" he asked, echoing words he had spoken before, but now with a different weight. Rose frowned. "Because they see what I am capable of." "No," he said quietly. "They fear what you might become. And you must decide if that will be for them or for yourself." Her breath caught. The words struck deep. She had always struggled between hiding her gift and embracing it. Now more than ever, she understood that the crown, the court, and the very kingdom itself would test her resolve. As the first stars appeared in the evening sky, a howl rang from the silver forest, long and mournful. Rose felt the stirrings of her wolf within, the silver flames answering the call. The prince watched her silently, a shadow of emotion flickering across his face, concern, respect, perhaps something more. But before she could speak, a tremor shook the courtyard. The ground beneath her paws rumbled as if warning of something coming. From the distant tree line, she saw the flicker of movement, shadows twisting unnaturally, eyes glowing in the darkness. "Prepare yourself," the prince said, his hand resting briefly on the hilt of his sword. "The true test is about to begin." Rose's heart raced, the silver flames along her fur igniting in anticipation. She knew then that the court, the crown, and the supernatural forces surrounding Werewolf would not allow her a single quiet moment. Her power had been revealed, and with it came both awe and danger. The night stretched on, the stars hidden behind clouds, as Rose and the prince stood together on the edge of the courtyard, facing the unknown. Shadows advanced, whispering secrets, and the air itself seemed charged with expectation. Rose's eyes narrowed. She was no longer merely a girl hiding her gift. She was the silver-flamed Luna Wolf, bound to the crown yet free in ways that could not be controlled. And as the first step of the challenge approached, she felt the pull of destiny stronger than ever. The masked figure from the night before appeared once again, lingering at the tree line, watching her. "Chains of flame bind you," the voice murmured, soft but certain, "but even chains can be broken if the heart dares." Rose's silver eyes met the darkness. She did not yet know how to break them, but she would learn. And as the shadows crept closer, as the wind carried whispers of prophecy and warning, she understood one thing with absolute clarity. Her journey had only begun, and the court, the crown, and the supernatural world of Werewolf would test her in ways she could not yet imagine. The wolf within her stirred, the silver flames licking higher, and Rose knew she would face whatever came with courage, fire, and a heart unwilling to bow. The night held its breath, The kingdom waited, and Rose, the silver-flamed Luna wolf, stepped into her destiny. The kingdom of Verith was quiet under the veil of a moonless night, but silence did not mean peace. The forest beyond the palace walls seemed alive, shadows moving as if whispering secrets no human should hear. Rose stood at the edge of a cliff, her silver-flamed hair brushing against her shoulders, eyes glowing faintly in the darkness. The events of the past days weighed heavily on her. The court watched her, the prince challenged her, and somewhere in the shadows, the masked figure observed her every move. Her heart still throbbed with the memory of their last confrontation, the moment the silver flames of her wolf form had nearly consumed her entirely. She had barely managed to regain control, to contain the fire that burned so fiercely within her. Yet the more she practiced restraint, the more she realized that her gift was not just power. It was a reflection of her heart, her choices, and her deepest fears. A rustle of leaves behind her made her spin, silver flames licking along her fur. The prince stepped into view, his expression unreadable in the dim light. "You should not wander alone," he said, voice low, almost tender, yet carrying that commanding edge she could not ignore. "I needed air," Rose replied, flicking her tail irritably, though her heart betrayed her calm. "The forest is different at night, it speaks to me." The prince stepped closer, the faint glow from her flames reflecting in his dark eyes. "It does," he said softly. "But it also hides dangers that even your silver flames cannot always chase away." Rose's gaze met his, and for a moment the distance between them seemed to vanish. She wanted to say something, to ask why he stayed so near despite the tension between them, but the words died on her lips. Instead, she let the silence stretch, letting the wind carry her thoughts outward, letting the wolf within her stretch and breathe under the moonless sky. "Rose," the prince said finally, his voice firm yet uncertain, "you are powerful, stronger than anyone here dares to admit, but there is more at stake than your gift. The kingdom itself, the crown, they depend on you in ways you do not yet understand." She stiffened, her ears flicking back. "Depend on me, the crown kneels to me already. I showed my strength. Isn't that enough?" "Strength alone does not protect a kingdom," he said quietly, "nor does it protect you. Power without understanding is a storm that will destroy both friend and foe alike." Rose's heart raced. The truth in his words cut deep, even as a spark of anger rose. She was not a pawn. She was the Luna wolf. And yet the way he spoke, the way he looked at her, it was not only caution. There was care. Something in his eyes told her he understood her fire better than anyone else, and that frightened her more than the shadows around them. Before she could reply, a sudden tremor ran through the ground beneath their feet. Leaves and branches shook violently as a dark, unnatural wind swept through the forest. Rose growled low in her throat, sensing the presence of something both powerful and dangerous approaching. From the shadows of the forest emerged figures she could barely make out, wolf-like creatures, their eyes glowing red, their forms twisted by some dark magic. They moved with unnatural grace, circling closer, whispering in voices that seemed both human and beast. Rose's silver flames flared, illuminating the forest in bursts of silver light. She shifted fully into her wolf form, muscles coiled, senses alert. The prince drew his sword, its edge catching the faint moonlight, and moved beside her with a quiet precision that spoke of both training and instinct. "They are bound to the curse," he said, his voice calm despite the growing danger. "They seek to claim you, to claim the power that flows in your blood." Rose's eyes narrowed. She had anticipated tests, challenges, and whispers of court intrigue, but this was something far darker. The creatures circled, growling low, and she felt the pull of the wolf within her rise, tempting her to let the flames consume all caution. "Focus," the prince said, and Rose realized his voice anchored her, tethering her fire to reason. Together they faced the dark horde, moving as one, her flame striking with precision, his sword cutting through the shadows. their actions synchronized though unspoken. The battle was both fierce and silent, broken only by the howl of wolves and the hiss of dark magic. Rose felt the thrill of power, tempered by the fear that she could lose control. Her flames surged, scorching the earth, driving the twisted wolves back. And then, just as suddenly, they vanished into the forest as if swallowed by the shadows themselves, leaving only silence and the scent of burned leaves. Rose lowered herself to her haunches, silver fur still shimmering in the dim light. Her chest heaved, heart racing, adrenaline still coursing through her veins. "You are stronger than even I imagined," the prince said, sheathing his sword. "But you cannot face this alone, not if the curse continues to grow." Rose shook her head, her eyes softening as she looked at him. "I don't want to face anything alone," she admitted quietly. "Even if I am the Luna Wolf, even if the crown bends, I cannot do it without allies." The prince's gaze softened. "Then trust me," he said simply. "Not because you must, but because you choose to." For a moment, the forest held its breath. The storm of danger had passed, but the tension remained, binding them together in ways neither had fully understood. The wolf inside her settled, silver flames flickering as though listening to the words spoken between them, sensing the promise of alliance, and perhaps something more. The next days were filled with lessons of control, diplomacy, and subtle power. Rose trained not only in her wolf form but in strategy, learning to anticipate threats both human and supernatural. The prince remained by her side, guiding her, testing her, sometimes challenging her in ways that left her frustrated and intrigued in equal measure. Their interactions were a delicate dance, strength against strength, wit against wit, fire against ice. And beneath it all, an unspoken bond began to grow, fragile yet undeniable, like the first spark of a fire that refused to be snuffed out. One evening, under the faint glow of lanterns in the palace gardens, the prince spoke again, his tone different this time, softer, almost vulnerable. "Rose, you must understand the truth of the curse. It is not only your power that binds you to this kingdom. The crown itself is entwined with the legacy of your lineage. If you fail, it is not only your life that will be lost, but the kingdom itself." Rose's breath caught. She had suspected this, but hearing it spoken aloud made her pulse quicken. "Then tell me what I must do," she whispered. "I am ready." "Ready?" he asked, studying her closely. "Power is not enough. You must learn to trust, to control, to sacrifice. And most importantly, you must decide what you are willing to protect and what you are willing to lose." The wind whispered through the trees, carrying the faint echo of howls from the silver forest. Rose's heart throbbed with fear and anticipation. She had trained for this, struggled for this, but the weight of destiny pressed heavily on her shoulders. Suddenly, a shadow passed across the garden. Rose's silver eyes narrowed as she sensed the presence again, the masked figure who had appeared before, watching from the edges of her journey. They had not spoken, but their intentions were clear. They were guiding her, testing her, and perhaps warning her of the trials yet to come. "You are not alone," the prince said, his hand brushing briefly against hers, a spark of warmth in the cold night. "But even together, the road ahead is dangerous. You must face it with courage, Rose, with fire and heart aligned." Rose nodded, feeling the weight of his words sink deep into her chest. The moonless night seemed to press down upon them, yet within her, the silver flames burned steady, a promise that she would not falter. She had already faced the court, the whispers, and the shadows of fear. Now she would face the curse itself, and whatever forces sought to claim her power. The forest beyond the palace stirred once more, and a faint howl echoed through the highlands, long and mournful. Rose's wolf instincts pricked, silver flames licking higher along her fur. She turned to the prince, determination burning in her eyes. "We face this together," she said, her voice firm. He nodded, dark eyes reflecting the faint light of her flames. "Together," he agreed. The night deepened, shadows twisting, and the kingdom of Werewolf seemed to hold its breath. The first step of the true test had arrived, and Rose, the silver-flamed Luna Wolf, felt the stirrings of a destiny larger than herself. And as the wind carried whispers of prophecy through the silvered trees, she realized that the chains of flame were not just a burden, they were a path. A path she would walk, with courage, with fire, and with a heart daring enough to face what lay ahead. The masked figure watched from the tree line, their voice a whisper carried on the wind. The eclipse comes soon. Hearts will be tested and power will demand its price. Will she rise or will she fall? Rose's silver eyes met the darkness. She did not yet know the answer. But one thing was certain, she would not bow, not yet. Not to the crown, not to the curse, not to fate itself. The silver-flamed Luna Wolf had awakened fully, and the night, the kingdom, and even the stars themselves would remember her name. The sky above Werewolf was dark and heavy, a thick blanket of clouds swallowing the moon and stars. A strange tension hung in the air, almost as if the world itself held its breath. In the highlands beyond the palace, the silver forest shimmered faintly, lit by the silver flames coursing through Rose's veins. Tonight, she knew, would be the night that would decide everything, her destiny, the crown, and the kingdom itself. Rose stood at the edge of the cliff where the forest began, her silver-flamed fur gleaming in the dim light. Her eyes swept the horizon, alert and unwavering. The wolf within her stirred, sensing both danger and opportunity. The masked figure, ever present in her mind though unseen in the shadows, had warned her that the eclipse was coming, that the chains of flame would demand a choice. Behind her, the prince emerged from the mist, his dark figure steady, his eyes filled with both worry and trust. He did not speak, but his presence alone was enough to anchor her, to remind her that she would not face this trial alone. "The creatures of the curse will come," he said softly, "and their hunger is not for flesh but for your power, your silver flames. They will test you in ways no human or wolf has faced." Rose's tail twitched, her muscles coiling as her mind sharpened. "I am ready," she said, though a small part of her quivered. Power alone was not enough. She needed strategy, courage, and the clarity to make choices that would not only save herself but the kingdom. The first signs of the curse appeared almost immediately. Shadows moved among the trees, figures twisted and dark, eyes glowing red like burning coals. They whispered, voices low and sibilant, carrying promises of fear, power, and destruction. Rose shifted fully into her wolf form, silver flames igniting along her fur, lighting the forest in bursts of ethereal glow. The creatures hesitated for a moment, unnerved by the intensity of her power, but then advanced, relentless and terrifying. Beside her, the prince raised his sword, its edge catching the faint shimmer of silver light. "Do not hold back," he said. "Even a Luna wolf must embrace her fire when the world demands it." Together, they faced the horde. Rose leaped, flames striking with precision, fangs and claws moving with a grace that was almost dance-like. The prince moved in perfect rhythm, defending her flank, striking with skill and timing. Shadows hissed and twisted, but each time Rose unleashed her flames, they faltered, retreating into the darkness. Yet, as the battle raged, Rose felt the pull of the curse deeper than before. The forest itself seemed alive, testing her, probing her soul. Each step she took, every strike she made, was mirrored by a surge in the silver flames, feeding both her power and the danger. She realized that to survive this, she could not rely on strength alone. She had to face the source, the root of the curse. A sudden wind tore through the trees, carrying with it a voice that was both familiar and terrifying. "Rose, you cannot run from what you are," the masked figure said, emerging now from the shadows at the edge of the battle. Their presence was commanding, almost spectral. "To break the curse, you must face your past, your fears, and your heart." Rose froze, silver flames flickering along her fur. The figure spoke the truth. This was not just a battle of strength, it was a battle of choice. Every instinct screamed to fight, to burn, to destroy, yet she knew that rage alone would not end this. The prince stepped closer, placing a hand against her shoulder. "You do not have to face it alone," he said, his voice steady. "Trust me, trust yourself." Rose nodded, taking a deep breath. The silver flames surged higher, not in anger but in focus, aligning with her will. She shifted her mind inward, tracing the threads of the curse to their origin. Deep in the heart of the forest, beneath twisted roots and ancient stones, she saw it. The spirit of her ancestor, a Luna wolf whose silver flames had been bound by the royal bloodline long ago. The chains were not just physical, they were the expectations, the fears, and the history that had trapped her lineage. Stepping forward, Rose spoke aloud, her voice echoing through the night. "I am not bound by fear. I am not bound by whispers or shadows. I am Rose, the silver-flamed Luna wolf, and I will choose my destiny." The ancestor's spirit materialized fully, eyes like molten silver, staring at her with both judgment and hope. "Do you understand what it takes to free both yourself and the crown?" the spirit asked. "Sacrifice humility and courage beyond the flames." Rose's tail flicked, her heart steadying. "I understand," she said. "I will face it. I will not hide. I will not flee. And I will protect what must be protected, even if it costs me everything." The forest trembled, shadows recoiling as if recognizing her choice. The cursed creatures shrieked and lunged one last time, but Rose, fully embracing her power and her heart, unleashed a wave of silver fire that did not burn blindly, but with precision, cleansing the forest of the dark magic. The shadows dissolved, leaving the forest eerily quiet, silver mist swirling in the aftermath. The ancestor's spirit nodded, the chains that had bound her lineage dissolving like smoke. "You are free," the spirit said softly. "And in freeing yourself, you have freed the kingdom as well." Exhausted but victorious, Rose shifted back into her human form. Her silver hair glimmered in the faint starlight that had begun to pierce the clouds. The prince was beside her, sword lowered, eyes filled with relief and admiration. "You have done it," he said, voice low. "The curse is broken." Rose smiled faintly, still catching her breath. "We did it," she corrected. He looked at her and she realized he was right. This victory had been shared, their bond forged in fire, shadow, and courage. The prince stepped closer, the tension between them finally softening. "Rose," he said, voice almost a whisper, "the crown may have watched you, the court may have doubted you, but I have always believed in you, not just for your power but for who you are." Rose felt a warmth in her chest that no silver flame could match. She stepped closer, heart pounding, the storm of the past days finally settling. "And I," she said softly, "believe in you. You have guided me, challenged me, and stayed by my side, even when I doubted myself." For a moment the forest was silent, the stars emerging through the clouds, casting their light on the two of them. Rose realized that power, courage, and destiny were not only about strength, they were about trust, loyalty, and the willingness to open one's heart despite fear. The prince extended his hand, and Rose took it without hesitation. Together they walked back toward the palace, side by side, the silver flames along her fur now calm, reflecting her inner peace. The kingdom lay quiet beneath them, and for the first time Rose felt that her path was her own, not dictated by whispers, curses, or prophecy, but by choice. As they entered the palace, the court and the king awaited. The king's gaze met Rose's, a flicker of surprise and respect passing across his stern face. "You have returned," he said, "and you have done what few could even imagine. The kingdom owes you more than words can express." Rose bowed lightly, a sense of pride and humility mixing in her heart. "The kingdom belongs to all of us," she said softly, "and I will protect it as I have been chosen to do." The prince stood beside her, his expression proud yet gentle. "And together," he said, "we will ensure that this kingdom thrives, free from shadows and curses alike." The masked figure who had guided and tested her from the shadows watched one last time from the palace steps. Their voice, soft and fading, carried through the night. The Luna Wolf has risen, and the kingdom shall remember her. The court whispered, awe and reverence mingling in their tones. The silver-flamed Luna Wolf was no longer a legend whispered in fear. She was real, alive, and sovereign. The crown had bowed, but now it did so not from fear, but from respect for the courage and heart that had forged this redemption. As dawn broke, painting the sky in shades of gold and silver, Rose and the prince stepped into the courtyard. The silver forest beyond shimmered in the new light, the curse broken, the kingdom free, and their bond stronger than ever. Rose looked up at the rising sun, silver flames within her heart calm, steady, and eternal. She had faced fear, shadow, and the weight of destiny itself, and she had emerged stronger, wiser, and free. The wolf within her purred softly, tail swishing with contentment. She was no longer just a noblewoman, no longer merely a gift of prophecy. She was Rose, the silver-flamed Luna Wolf, sovereign of her own destiny, protector of the kingdom, and master of both heart and flame. And as the first light of day kissed the highlands, she knew that the story of the Luna Wolf would be told for generations, not as a tale of fear, but as a tale of courage, trust, and the power of a heart willing to rise above every shadow. The kingdom of Werewolf was safe, the curse broken, and the bond between Rose and the prince unshakable. Yet deep in the silver forest, faint whispers of magic lingered, a reminder that the world was vast, mysterious, and full of challenges. But for now, Rose's journey had reached its most triumphant chapter. She smiled, silver flames flickering gently around her, and knew one thing with certainty. She had chosen her destiny, and it had chosen her right back. The silver-flamed Luna Wolf had redeemed herself, and in doing so, she had redeemed the heart of the kingdom.